Everybody looks good to me.
Yeah.
It's like everybody looks tall to me.
Yes.
I went in for my last physical, and she said, "You're 5'8". I said, "No, I've been 5'9" my whole life."
All right. That's what I was telling my dad, and he goes, "You used to be 6'1". My mom's like, "No, you're now 5'11" because you're shrinking." But he's
I
85.
guess as you age,
I think the bones
I
compress
need to
and
get one of those.
stretchers.
Okay.
Mr. Braswell, and you guys all ready?
Good to see you.
You guys ready? Okay. All right, let's get this thing rolling. I'd like to call to order the December 13th, 2021 Planning Board meeting. I would like to ask if Mark Steele would please offer the invocation.
Happy to. Dear Lord, this holiday, holy day season, we ask that you bless and protect our town, the town staff, and all of our residents. We pray that we may safely celebrate in your name. Amen.
Oh, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amanda, do we have some items of information?
And I would like for you to come down here with me, please.
Oh, trouble.
Watch.
So while he's coming down, this is Mr. Marks' last planning board meeting. Mr. Marks has been on the planning board since 2013 and has been the chair for the past 2 years. During very odd times, we've worked through how to navigate planning board virtually, and you've got to do things that no other planning board chair has ever had to do before. And so we just want to take this time to appreciate your years of service and volunteering for a role that not many in the community volunteer to take, because there's a lot of hard decisions to make. And so we appreciate your years of
Thank
service.
you, and thank you for the staff. The staff has been phenomenal, makes our job much easier. So
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. At this time, we will open up for any public comment for any non-public agenda items. Does anybody wish to come forth and speak? Staff, was any public comments emailed or voicemail? Okay. With that, we will move to consent item number 1, the minutes from the November 8th meeting. And Reggie pointed out that there was one error on the first item, which was the public hearing that Jenna presented. And the statement was made that Member Skinner called for motion, and actually it was Member Skinner that made the motion, and then Member Sherman seconded it. So I think the minutes have been amended that I will sign, but there was that one note. So with that, if there's any other comments or any other changes, please let me know. If not, I just need a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I have a motion from Tim. Do I have a second?
A second.
Second from Keith. Any other comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Consent item passes unanimously. Item number 1 that Shelley was going to present, the applicant has asked that that be continued, so that one will be presented at the January 10th, 2022 meeting. Next up is Liz, public hearing and possible motion regarding rezoning case 21CZ19, the 1016 North Salem Street.
Yes, good afternoon. So the property on North Salem Street is between Apex Peakway and Highway 64 on North Salem Street. The applicant is proposing to rezone a portion of the property at .426. The primary structure is listed on the North Carolina State Historic Preservation Office survey. The property is currently zoned residential agriculture, and the applicant is proposing to rezone to medium density residential conditional zoning. The 2045 land use map identifies the subject property as mixed use, medium density residential, office employment, commercial services. The proposed to medium density residential conditional zoning is consistent with the land use classification. The applicant conducted a neighborhood meeting on August 26th, and a copy of the neighborhood report is in your packet. A full list of the uses and zoning conditions can be found on page 2 of the staff report. The applicant is proposing single-family and accessory apartment. The two conditions: the existing home will remain on the property, and any renovations to the primary structure will follow the latest edition of the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation. All other structures or new development shall comply with the applicable sections of the UDO. Planning staff can recommend approval because the proposed medium-density residential conditional zoning meets the 2045 land use map and will ensure preservation of the historic structure. And the applicant is also here if you have any questions.
Any questions for Liz at this time? Okay.
In the staff report, it sounded like this was a recombination of 2 lots and a rezoning, but yet the titling just says it's rezoning.
So right now it's just a rezoning, a portion of the property. There will not be recombination. There would more than likely be an exempt plat done to subdivide the property.
So that when you look at the map in the staff report, it showed the existing property which surrounds that historic home. And then it shows what looks like the back lot. So that's not part of this rezoning?
Only the yellow portion is a part of this rezoning.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
Got it. Thank you.
Would the applicant like to make a statement?
Hello, Chairman Marks, and thank you so much, Liz, for presenting that so well. I'm Caroline Richardson with Withers Ravenel. I have Brindy Vega behind me. She is one of my colleagues. Liz did a great job of, explaining what we're doing, but I just wanted to emphasize, basically, on behalf of the applicant, WFINV, that we are seeking the MDCZ rezoning to allow for eventually this site to be preserved. Right now, there is a site plan in place, or not in place, but up for review that will be going before council to basically expand Thales in the back portion of this lot. It will not go through this lot, though. In addition, we wanted to be able to meet the requirements of the district. And so currently there are some setbacks and frontage rules that don't, with the property in RA, the house would not be compliant. It would be non-conforming if we did not do this rezoning. So basically the lot is going to be similar to the Magnolia Walk and I believe it's Haddon Place. So it'll be more like those lot sizes, which are across the street. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
The site plan won't go to council.
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. The site plan will not be going to council. It'll be staff review.
Does anybody have any questions for Carolyn?
Yeah, now I'm even more confused. So when you look at the staff report and you see the overhead shot, there's not enough room around the historic home to do any development. So that's why it seemed to me, okay, it makes sense. If we're going to recombine the back lot and the front lot, then you can rezone the whole thing. So are we actually doing this in steps? Are we doing a rezoning for just the front lot, and then we're going to recombine later, and it'll take with it the zoning of the front lot?
The back of the lot will not take on the zoning of the front lot, no. It'll just be, we're just applying today for the rezoning of the front portion.
Okay. So you just spoke about the back lots being expanded into business, Bailey?
For context, yes.
Yeah, but
That's not part of this.
That's not part of this rezone.
No, it's not.
Got
No, I was just going to explain that if there is a recombination, it'll be the back portion of the lot combined with the existing Thales lot to the north.
it. Okay. Got it. Okay.
Does anybody else have any questions?
Jeff, do you have any with this?
No, I applaud you for maintaining the house and for following the Secretary of Interior standards and realizing it's already on the study list. So, thank you for saving the house.
You are very welcome. We also are working with Capital Area Preservation. I didn't mention that to use any of the reclaimed structure that is the garage right now, or the accessory parcel or accessory unit. So we will be hopefully trying to reuse those materials.
Any other questions for the applicant at this time? Thank you, Carol.
Okay, thank you so much.
This time we'll open up for public hearing. Does anybody wish to come forward? All right, seeing none, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for any further discussion or question or possible motion. Jeff, based on your previous comment from the historic perspective, you're okay with everything that's...
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I think I know the development's gonna happen as long as we can tie in development with maintaining the houses along Salem Street as they are. And we have a commitment from them to be a residential structure. I think it's sort of a win-win for everybody.
Okay, thank you.
I did have a question for staff. Real quick, I remember, gosh, it must have been a year ago, we saw a transportation plan for North Salem where they're talking about blowing that road out. And I know, Jeff, you brought up, like, if there's right of way that had to be dedicated, and I think that's done at time of rezoning, it could potentially affect the historical homes through there. Is that, we know if that's still the case? Like, is there right of way that has to be dedicated as part of the zoning of this property?
Right of way is, so we do have a current sidewalk project under review right now. So right of way would be required at that time to fill in that gap.
Council did not approve the plan to widen any, so the section that's on the transportation plan is a 3-lane section through here. So there's less right of way.
Okay. Any other discussion or possible motion?
I will make a motion that we approve case 21 CZ 19 or recommend approval to the council.
Okay, I have a motion from Mark and a second from Tina. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? So, motion passes unanimously. And next, Shelley is going to present the public hearing and possible motion regarding rezoning case 21 CZ20, the 3075 Lufkin Road self-storage.
Good evening.
Hello, Shelley.
Just to give you guys an idea of where we're looking at, we're going to go and take a right down Center Street here, go all the way down until we cross US 1, and it's going to be on our right-hand side at the corner of US 1 and Lufkin Road. So this is what it looks like. The parcel on this case is approximately 3.08 acres. It is currently heavily treed with some fairly steep slopes. If you guys have ever sat in the right-hand lane of Lufkin, well, of 1010 trying to turn onto Lufkin, you realize it kind of goes down fairly significantly. Currently, it is zoned planned commercial and planned commercial conditional use. It actually has 3 different zoning districts on this one little tiny piece. And the applicant is proposing to amend this to light industrial conditional zoning. Thought I fixed that. The 2045 land use map calls this as commercial services. If the rezoning is approved by town council, the land use map will automatically get updated to industrial services per some state law changes that happened recently. So, the applicant conducted a neighborhood meeting on August 26th. The tenants of a couple of the properties were not notified at the time, so the applicant had to have a second neighborhood meeting, which was held on November 26th, and both meeting reports are attached to your staff report. The applicant is proposing the following uses. There's 14 of these listed, so I'm not going to read all of them to you. I'm just going to pick out a couple. Self-service storage, medical or dental office or clinic, office, business, or professional, pet services, or woodworking or cabinet making. They've also provided us with a list of proposed conditions. Most of those are architectural in nature and are consistent with what we typically see for commercial architectural standards. The staff report lists 4 that were added to meet the EAB's recommendations. First of those is that they will provide a minimum 10 kilowatt rooftop solar system to offset energy use. Second is the project shall preserve existing tree canopy within the required perimeter buffers and RCA as required by the UDO, and any supplemental landscaping within those buffers shall be native plant species. And then 3, in order to reduce irrigation and chemical use, the development shall plant warm season grasses where turf grass is called for on the landscaping plans. All other required landscaping shall consist of drought-tolerant native plants. And in order to meet the International Dark Sky Association standards, all outdoor lighting and parking fixtures shall be LED with a full cutoff style and a color temperature of 3,000 Kelvin or less. That's that nice warm yellow color, so none of those funky looking blue ones. There are 2 actually architectural conditions that have been proposed for this. One is that a self-service storage building shall have a maximum height of 3 stories above grade or 40 feet. And the other is that the main entrance on the building will be emphasized. The Apex Environmental Advisory Board had a pre-application meeting for this rezoning on August 19th. They recommended 8 zoning conditions, and those are listed in the table on your staff report. All of them except for 3 were included, and those were at staff recommendation. Planning staff recommended that the applicant not include suggested conditions 1 and 3. Number 1 being that interior lighting of the building will be on motion sensors, and number 3 that low flow plumbing fixtures will be used for all plumbing. And this is just because due to some recent state law changes, the building inspections department cannot require more than the minimum listed in the building code. So they can't enforce that. And the planning department has no authority over things interior to the building. We only have authority over exterior aesthetics. So we prefer not to have zoning conditions that are not enforceable because it's misleading both to the applicant and to any of the residents or property owners in the surrounding area who might think, oh, well, that's guaranteed then. So we recommended not putting that one in there. And then we also recommended against condition 4, which said to limit parking spaces to 15 spaces maximum to minimize stormwater impacts. This is because when the application was originally turned in, the applicant had limited the use to self-service storage only. We being the planning department, prefer to have multiple uses in a rezoning because if a particular project falls through, That means we don't necessarily have to come back and show you the same piece of property the next time someone wants to buy it. We try to kind of broaden that a little bit. And so we recommended taking that off because although 15 spaces is a lot for a self-service storage facility, it is not very much if you're looking at a medical office or a dental office or honestly several of the other uses. So we didn't want to bind some uses while at the same time allowing extra for others. So planning staff has also been working with the applicant on a condition to limit the visibility of any interior doors if it becomes a self-service storage building, to limit that visibility of interior doors through the exterior glass. We haven't come to a consensus yet. We've been working on it for the last couple weeks or so. And it's just a time thing. And we recommend approval of the project with the assumption that we will be able to come to a consensus before town council. So that said, our recommendation is approval if we can add a condition to that effect.
Okay.
If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. The applicant is also here.
Any questions for Shelley at this time?
Shelley, I got a question. Do you envision that the architectural committed elements would make this feel and appear similar to like the Be Safe over there next to the Home Depot?
Well, so it will have it's intended to have more of an office building look to it. And this will be a much smaller building. Be Safe is fairly large because the site that it's on provides that capacity. This is going to have a much smaller footprint to it than Be Safe, but it'll probably have similar materials and things. The condition that we're working on regarding the doors on the inside of the building being visible through the windows is actually to mitigate some of the concerns that we've heard since Be Safe was built. It's fairly brightly lit, and there's a panel of windows that makes those doors quite visible from the outside. So we're working with the applicant to address that, and they're willing to. We're just trying to work out the fine nuances of that condition at the moment. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, just trying to think of something. I drive up Highway 55 going to RTP every day, and there's two in Cary. There's one next to the water well, one looks very attractive for Cary, and then one like
Yeah, I know. I think I know exactly which ones you're talking about.
I was looking at where this is in Apex. It's heavily traveled road kind of coming into our town. But then again, there's ample tree states.
Well, and what you're seeing here is actually not the amount of the site that will be protected. So there's right-of-way that'll have to be designated roughly through here.
I'm looking at page 46 of the staff report. The concept plan with the applicant.
Okay, if you look at the aerial image that's on your screen right now, the other screen, Ryan. Oh, it's messed up. Oh, sorry, I apologize. Okay, so if you look at the, there should be an aerial image in your staff report that's in there. So basically where the corner, where it looks like there should be a curved corner on the northernmost piece of 1010, but it's kind of cut off. And then if you follow that around to the intersection of Lufkin and 1010, and it also again looks like it should have a curved piece, but it's kind of cut off. A portion of that is going to end up being right-of-way for 1010 when it gets expanded in 10 or 15 years. Right now we're anticipating 2030-ish. But they will have to preserve an additional 30 feet on top of that. So at the very least, until 1010 is expanded, there will be right-of-way plus buffer through there.
That wasn't the conceptual, they show the right-of-way portion.
Yes, they did. And they are required to have a 50-foot buffer off of, well, it's where the old Lufkin Road right-of-way used to be before it got realigned, but it's now part of the DOT right of way for US 1. So there'll be a 50-foot buffer off of that as well. Any other questions?
You said the building height was 40 feet.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Shelley. Would the applicant like to make a statement?
It is not what I... Oh, let's see. Told them to put this on there. 1 second, gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen. Where are you? There you are. Thanks, Dan.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Board. My name is Chad Essick. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Corner Sproul, 301 Fayetteville Street, Suite 1900. Here this afternoon on behalf of the applicant and the proposed developer, Widgeon Capital. Joining me this evening is Whit Brown and Al Goodrich with Widgeon Capital, as well as our consultant, Jamie Loyak with Hager Smith Design. I appreciate staff's presentation and overview, and we'll try not to be too repetitive. Again, this is just over a 3-acre site, currently zoned planned commercial conditional use, currently vacant. As you can see from the surrounding area, light industrial is the predominant zoning for the property south of US 1 and west of 1010 Road. There's some B1 in there and some PC in the immediate area. The existing zoning allows a number of uses under the existing zoning by right. Listed here are just a handful of those uses. Some of those are fairly intensive traffic generating uses like drive-through restaurants, retail sales, gas stations, that sort of thing. And we think this site is better suited for some lower impact traffic use, given where it's at and some of the traffic considerations that are already in the area. And so what's kind of driving this rezoning request, as was noted, was a proposed self-storage facility, which we think would be more appropriate on this site than currently what's allowed by right. So as Ms. Mayo outlined, the proposed uses under the proposed zoning, so some of those are listed out there. We had proposed originally to limit it to even more uses, but staff, as noted, recommended that we add some additional uses in the event that this project didn't move forward and wouldn't have to come back for a rezoning. I only say that to the extent there's any uses that anyone finds objectionable. We're not opposed to removing those as a condition, but again, that was a request that was made from staff. Staff did a good job of going through the proposed conditions, so I don't really want to reiterate all of that, but we have incorporated a number of recommendations from the Environmental Advisory Board into our zoning conditions. We have prohibited some of the more intense uses that would be allowed in the LI district, such as warehousing, breweries, distilleries, manufacturing. Those types of uses have been conditioned out of the zoning case. Again, here's a little bit more detail on some of the architectural. I think there was a question raised earlier about the architectural conditions related to this proposed building. We have committed to a number of high quality materials, brick masonry, stone, they're listed there, so I won't read them, but some architectural conditions. As noted, the facility would have a maximum height of 3 stories or 40 feet. the site is designated commercial services on the future land use map, but we believe that, or excuse me, the land use map, but with the appropriate LI conditioned with the uses that we've proposed, we think that it remains consistent with that designation. I would note that self-storage facility is listed as a commercial use under the UDO. It's actually not listed as an industrial use, so we think it's consistent, that use is consistent with that designation. So this is just the conceptual kind of site plan for the site. As noted, significant tree save up along 1010 Road, as well as a significant right-of-way dedication. So at this time, there is a significant vegetation between the proposed building and 1010 Road. Obviously, some of that may be dedicated as right-of-way in the future, but would still maintain a 30-foot along that portion of the property. And then I would note to the rear of the property, you have a 50-foot tree save along the rear, as well as in addition to that, all that area behind it up to US 1, as was noted, is DOT, that I don't think there's any plans to disturb that or to further impact that vegetation. So pretty significant separation between the facility and US 1. Just to give a little bit of context, and hopefully you can see this, but just elevations from 1010 Road, you'll see, let's see if I can, so this is a cross section at the top, but the one immediately below, that's the east-west elevation. So you have 1010 Road there to the right. And you'll see that this building sits down. And so really from 1010 Road, you're really only going to be able to see the top 2 stories of the building, in addition to the fact there's that existing vegetation that's already going to be there, at least for 30 feet, and until that right of way is disturbed, you know, an additional a buffer. So with that, I won't, as staff noted, we are working on a condition related to visibility of storage or visibility through the windows on the facades. We are committed to working with them on that. We had proposed really only allowing that on the Lufkin Road side and 15% of that facade, which we think is a good commitment, and not having any on the 1010 Road side or US 1. But we want to make sure we work through that condition and make sure it's worded right, make sure staff is in agreement. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Obviously, we would respectfully ask a recommendation for approval, and thank you for your time.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Essex?
So you mentioned the building height again. Just the reason I was asking is because on that staff report on page 46, the one you just had up, it was saying it was a 4-story, 60,000 square foot.
Yes, sir.
And so then you mentioned 3-story and different footprint. So I just want to make sure we just know it is 3-story, 40 feet.
Yes, sir.
Not the 4-story that's listed here.
Yes, sir, that's correct. When we originally submitted, we had added 4 stories, and we, in response to some staff comments, we committed to the 3-story, 40-foot height limit.
Understand.
That is the commitment. Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir. At this time, we'll open up for public comment. Is there anybody who wishes to come forward? Not seeing any. I'll close the public comment and bring it back to the board for discussion or possible motion.
Well, this is Tina. I'm going to sound like a bit of a broken record. I'm pretty committed to the 2045 land use map, unless there is a significant and compelling reason to change the zoning. It's going to benefit the community. And as heard on the streets, either plentiful in storage facilities and mattress stores. And so given that, just a quick jog to the north or a quick jog to the south, to get my geography right, there's a storage facility about a half mile half a mile, I guess that's probably to the east, and then a half a mile, just under a mile to the north, another mile, I'm sorry, but another mile west of this proposed location, there's another storage facility, and that's just within a sort of a mile radius. We can get outside of that and talk about the additional facilities that are available. So given that I don't see the benefit to the community to change the zoning to not be reflective of the land use map, so I would not be supporting this rezoning application.
Mr. has brought up the comment, this is going to light industrial for it to be but when I first saw it, I thought that a storage facility would be more of a commercial services. Can you explain that difference?
So it technically is, we have two different sections of our UDO that talk about different contexts. The use table does list this as more of a commercial use, but it's generally located in light industrial or in the Tech Flex district. Those are the only two districts that the UDO currently permits it in. Tech Flex allows it with some additional requirements. It has to be behind another building and has to have, and that building has to have offices or daycares or spas or something along those lines in front of it so that it's not as visible. And the reason why it's typically been located in industrial areas is until the last 15 years or so, self-service storage facilities have typically been somewhat unsightly. And the idea was to keep them in a portion of the town that isn't as frequently viewed by everyday residents as they drive by. Now, I will say that in the last 15 years or so, with the kind of the more persistent use of climate-controlled, bigger building style storage buildings, that's not been as much of an issue, although it can sometimes still crop up. But typically speaking, they've just been located in that area primarily for aesthetics.
Okay.
Aesthetic.
Generally speaking, yes. I will say that in this situation, town staff is recommending approval and is supporting this because we have actually seen no fewer than 6 or 7 pre-application meetings for this particular parcel in the 8 years that I've been here, and nothing has been able to make it work, simply because most of them require too much parking or too much traffic, or have too many traffic impacts to it. And because the developer has tried consistently to bring in a use of some kind that will work here without necessarily having to provide a huge number of traffic impacts that would take this 3-acre site down to a much smaller space. And because it has the buffers on it, staff is willing to recommend approval so that the property owner can get some use out of his property.
Thanks, Shelley.
Shelley, thank you for that additional information. And I think the only thing I would encourage staff to do is when we find situations like this, for whatever reason, the 2045 land use map does not accommodate, or we're finding that it's not accommodating, it would be incredibly helpful for staff to bring that to the planning board's attention by way of amendment or whatever that needs to look like, so that we're aware that this proposed, this was what was previously proposed, this is what's coming, it's not working. My kind of public stance on it is that the 2045 land use map is what the community has agreed upon, and what should be going, what should be going forward in a particular section, a particular area, a particular neighbor of town. And again, when neighbors are looking at, how is this going to affect me? How is this going to affect my property value? How is this going to affect my various quality of life? I'm looking at, well, this is what we as a board, the council approved, and that's what they're expecting. And so unless it's going to add improvement to the quality of life, if I'm hesitant to change. I think that conversation would be a bit reverse if staff were putting that forward and the public was aware and more public manner that this would.
So,
Years before she responds, because I agree with everything you said. I liked it better when we did a rezoning when we did the land use map amendment, and then we did the rezoning right after. And I understand the state, and I would love for you to educate us more. I'm really in the dark about that law change, but it did make it a lot more clear to me when we were making a change around the land use map, and we were kind of told, here's the big thinking around that, which is kind of what I think you're asking for. I love that. So help us out.
okay.
How can we do that in the context of the new law?
So I think I want to go back to Ms. Sherman's first point, and I think in some ways what you're asking for makes sense. When we recognize that a land use designation in a certain part of our jurisdiction isn't working and needs to be changed, and we can recognize that up front, then perhaps we need to evaluate that. And we do from time to time make those evaluations and bring amendments forward. There are, although sometimes cases where it's not as cut and dry, because we would not want to designate this site necessarily as industrial employment up front, because we want to be very careful about what uses people feel like are expected to be here. And it's not necessarily everything that you would normally consider under industrial employment. And it's a little chicken and egg, because as part of a rezoning request, we get to see the proposed uses and can understand whether or not it's fitting the context of the area or not. So in this case, we did not feel that it was necessarily appropriate to preemptively change the land use designation, but instead, kind of like we had been doing all in the years past, where there was an actual request for a land use map amendment, still in the same, I mean, there's really not much change. They're still requesting a change to the land use map amendment with this rezoning. And you're still considering the impact to the land use map when you're considering this rezoning, just as if the label on the staff report said 2045 land use map amendment and rezoning. So the effect is still the same. What the state basically, the legislation said is, as in a lot of communities, if you're hearing these at the same time anyway, why have a formal request? Just approve the land use map change with the rezoning. And there's pros and cons of some communities have the land use map amendment had it completely separate from the rezoning process, and it took months and months and months to go through sometimes. So we're still considering, and staff is still looking at, okay, does this land use map amendment make sense in this location when we're evaluating whether or not to recommend approval. So I definitely do agree with what you're saying in many regards. We just have to be very careful in certain situations, and that's why often looking at it in the context of the limitations of the zoning district is helpful.
Thanks, Amanda. So like I said, as my comment before, when I saw this as I would have just thought it was commercial service anyways, and I didn't, and so I sort of, what they're trying to do with the property and with all the trees and hardly any parking, I think it still fits well in there.
I think the general location in the area fits what they're putting. Across the street, you've got a church, you've got other commercial services there. It kind of fits the business park, and I think it's going to be tucked away. I understand, the comments, Ms. Sherman, about the land use map, and I think that's a very good general guideline, but I also don't think that's the gospel. And I don't think that, we should be able to kind of amend and conform to what the reality is when people are putting together land use maps. They don't know of every specific little thing that can go into every single property. A lot of them aren't the professionals anyways. Members of the community might not understand the UDO. And I think this is one of these situations here. I actually tend to like the location of it. With all the additional houses that are yet to even be built, that the town has already approved, I don't think that we can determine what the market is going to say and if we have too many or too little of one necessary thing. I think the staff is making their best case for if the business were to fail, we have something else to put there. So I think that's a good fail-safe for us. But I say let the market speak for itself. And I would be for this rezoning.
Thanks, Tim.
I look at this as, in a rezoning, what is the town giving up? And you know, you look at that road from the traffic standpoint, and it's overwhelmed with trips right now. So to give it a use, to protect the landowner for, you know, viability of development, which we heard from staff that they're already struggling, coupled with a use that has lower traffic generation on an already taxed road, I don't really see us giving up a whole lot, while at the same time the applicant has proper extensive architectural controls, which in my opinion is what I want to preserve as, you know, Apexian, to make sure we have a good visual character of our town. I'm not seeing us giving up a whole lot, but I empathize with what Ms. Sherman said as well. You know, what if it's going to be a commercial, but then what you said, Chairman, you know, it feels commercial. So I'm with y'all. I think I could support it on those merits.
Any other comments or a possible motion?
I guess my question is that the staff asked us to recommend approval with this one additional condition that they're still working on, correct? So with that, and with thank you for all those explanations. And so I think it is in the spirit of the land use map without being to the letter of it. So I'm prepared to make a motion to recommend to the council that they approve number 21 CZ 20 with the additional condition that has to do with the visibility of the doors through the windows. That's my motion.
Okay, thank you, Mark. I have a motion.
Second.
And a second from Keith. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6-1. Yeah.
Can you, due to the inconsistency with the current land use map?
Okay. So that closes the public hearing. We have one new business agenda. Amanda, it wouldn't be my last meeting without a UDO.
I know, I did that just for you.
She searched and searched and searched.
I saved them up.
Thank
All right. So there are actually two amendments to hear tonight, and I will pause after the first one to see if you have any questions. The first amendment is actually requested by our legal staff, and this is to amend the section for penalties and remedies for violations of the article to reference the statute that allows for criminal penalties to be assessed for development regulations that are violated. And it's not typical to have a criminal penalty, but so we just want to ensure that there is the statute that provides that authority is clearly referenced in the ordinance, and also to specify the type of misdemeanor that that would be charged would be a class 1, so that that information was missing previously. And then to strike the last sentence as Chapter 11 of the Town's Code of Ordinances had been repealed, so that needed to come out of the UDO as well. That's the gist of that amendment.
Okay. Any questions on that one from Amanda? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the second set of amendments is to the stormwater control measures section and the fences, walls, and berms section of the UDO in order to allow fences to completely enclose a stormwater control measure, SCM, even if some or all of that SCM is dedicated or proposed to be dedicated as RCA. Over time, less of an SEM is allowed to count as RCA, but the intent of RCA is it's a natural area. It's, you know, something that's typically preserved. And so fences are not a natural type feature, and so they were not allowed to be included or surround an SEM if that was to be dedicated as RCA. And so over time, the state has allowed less plantings around and in the vicinity of SEMs, and there have been a few requests from neighborhoods to install fencing along a portion or all of due to concerns about slope or other issues. And so the amendments to the SEM section would be to clarify that a peripheral fence can be installed in accordance with the fences, walls, and berms section. And then in that fences section, the standard, we would strike the language that says that they are not allowed around detention and retention basins, and that any fence along or around a stormwater control measure shall only be constructed of wrought iron or black aluminum pickets or products created to resemble these materials. We want to ensure that it's not opaque or that it's not chain link. And so I'm happy to answer any questions that you have on this amendment. Staff is, of course, recommending approval of both.
I had a question about the very last part of the fence. It seemed to me that in doing, I totally understand why you're doing this, but it seemed to me that you were inadvertently relieving them of certain slope requirements. It almost sounded to me reading this that if you had a fence, then the slope could be whatever you want. But the slope is not just for safety, it's also for erosion.
So that
Is that intentional, or is that?
No, it's not intentional, and the developer, the engineer will still have to design a stormwater control measure to meet all of DEQ standards, right? So whatever that maximum slope is and the, you know, and stability of the pond, that does not change by this at all. And so this is just simply to allow the fence to go up regardless of what the slope is.
Got it. So here, let me just read it out loud and see if anybody else. And by the way, I'm up to here with SEMs because of issues in our HOA. So I apologize, but you got to read it. So detention and retention basin edges shall be contoured and shaped to form low angles at the primary water line. That's primarily for erosion, and thereby ensuring greater pedestrian safety, or a peripheral fence shall be installed. So that, so you see how I'm reading that?
I see how you're reading that now.
You don't have to have that if you have a fence. I agree.
So I think, thank you for pointing that out. I did not read it in that way before. And so I was basically trying to take the in lieu of peripheral fencing wording that was already there, which I think still does the same, still brings up the same concern. And so it could just be that we strike the word or and create a new sentence, period. A peripheral fence may be installed in accordance with.
That's exactly what I was.
And I can continue to work with our water resources staff to ensure that there's no unintended consequence with that change in the wording. This is not going to town council until January 11th to public hearing, so I do have some time to work with staff to ensure. So to ensure that I understand the concern, what we want to avoid is that there's an implication that the slope is, which it can't be. There's still state rules that have to be followed, but we want to avoid the implication that.
Put a fence up. I don't care what the slope is.
That's what I'm.
Yeah.
Right.
No, great catch, Mark.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, good job.
And I just want to ask a question, in the striking the fences are not allowed in that for the section, does that section need to be edited at all?
I don't believe so, because there's actually a little bit of a conflict here, because as you can see in 6, it says in lieu of peripheral fencing, so it gives the implication that peripheral fencing is allowed. And then you get to 827, and I think this was just based on our past interpretations about fences not allowed in when it's counted as RCA. So I don't believe there's any harm in striking fences are not allowed around this, because Section 6 doesn't prevent them. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Amanda? Okay, bring it back to the board for possible motion or any further discussion.
Recommendations to recommend approval to council for these changes in the UDO.
With the one, with the correction that Mark added. Okay. Okay, so I have a motion from Tina. Do I have a second? Second from Mark. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. With that, it's been a pleasure working with everybody, especially staff. You guys make our jobs a lot easier and help with all the clarification, but thank you very much. I just need a motion to adjourn.
This will be your last motion.
This is my last motion. So.
We should draw it out. What do you think?
I'm fine, I'm good.
We need to have discussion.
We could draw it out at the bar.
So moved.
Motion from Mark. Second from Tina. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion to.
Come visit.
I'll stop by occasionally.
It's a heavy gap on it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the first time.